Neymar da Silva Santos Jr. was born in Brazil, a country where football is not simply played, but deeply felt, absorbed into daily life, into conversations, into emotions, and into dreams that begin long before a child ever steps onto a professional pitch. Football in Brazil is culture, it is identity, and it is often the first language many children learn before they can fully understand the world around them. From the earliest moments of his childhood, Neymar was surrounded by the ball, not as an object of discipline or obligation, but as a natural extension of himself, something that responded instinctively to his creativity, his curiosity, and his desire to express joy through movement. There were no strict rules at first, no tactical boards, no expectations of greatness. Only space, imagination, and freedom. Playing on small courts, uneven pitches, and crowded spaces, Neymar developed instincts that cannot be taught in academies or learned from manuals. Quick decision-making, close control, explosive acceleration, and above all, unpredictability. Every dribble was a reaction to the moment, every touch a response to the defender's movement, every feint a spontaneous act of creativity rather than calculation. This environment shaped far more than his technical ability. It shaped his mentality, because Neymar did not grow up learning how to play safe football. He learned how to play expressive football. He wanted to entertain, to provoke reactions, to create moments that made people stop and watch. At Santos, this joy began to transform into something visible to the entire football world. Defenders struggled not only because of his speed or skill, but because they could not predict him. Fans leaned forward in their seats before he even received the ball. There was always anticipation, always the feeling that something unexpected was about to happen. But alongside this rapid rise came something far heavier: pressure, expectation, responsibility. Brazil was not simply watching Neymar develop. Brazil was projecting its hopes onto him, searching for the next symbol of happiness, the next player who could restore joy, pride, and belief on the pitch. And slowly, almost invisibly, the weight of a nation began to settle on shoulders that were still growing. The boy who once played freely began to hear comparisons, predictions, and demands. Neymar was no longer just a promising young talent. He was becoming a promise himself, a future, a responsibility that extended far beyond the touchline. And when football shifts from being play to being expectation, something changes internally. Not immediately, not dramatically, but quietly, subtly. Because the higher the talent, the heavier the pressure becomes. And Neymar, long before he reached his physical or emotional peak, was already standing beneath the brightest lights in world football. As Neymar continued to develop, his football began to change meaning. Not because his style disappeared, but because the context around him evolved. Goals started to arrive more frequently, but more importantly, they started to matter in a different way. These were no longer just moments of celebration. They became signals, proof, confirmation that Neymar was not only talented, but decisive. At Santos, Neymar scored goals in finals, goals in decisive matches, goals that directly influenced titles and trophies. These moments built his reputation slowly, step by step, season by season. With every goal, the expectations surrounding his name expanded. The joy was still there, but now it was accompanied by demand. Crowds did not come only to watch Neymar play, they came to see him decide games. And when a player reaches that point, football changes, because talent becomes obligation, creativity becomes requirement. The move to Europe amplified everything. Stadiums grew, pressure intensified, and Neymar arrived carrying not only his skill, but the weight of anticipation. At Barcelona, he adapted quickly, scoring in league matches, contributing in Champions League nights, and delivering when games demanded precision rather than freedom. One goal in particular would forever define his status, a goal in a Champions League final, a moment where history separates participants from protagonists. Neymar stepped into that moment without hesitation, and football responded. Recognition followed: individual awards, global attention, a place on the Ballon d'Or podium as the third best player in the world. This was no longer potential, it was confirmation. And yet, with every achievement, the margin for error disappeared. Expectation does not celebrate, it waits. As Neymar's name grew, something fundamental changed around him. Football was no longer just about what happened on the pitch. It became about perception, expectation, and interpretation. Every movement, every expression, every decision started to carry meaning beyond the game itself. The attention was constant. Cameras followed him before matches, during matches, and long after the final whistle. Social media transformed moments into narratives, and narratives into judgment. A dribble could be seen as art by some and disrespect by others. A smile could be confidence or arrogance, depending on who was watching. This level of exposure creates a pressure that is difficult to measure. Because it is not tied to performance alone, it is tied to identity. Neymar was no longer just evaluated as a footballer. He was evaluated as a symbol. Injuries amplified this scrutiny. Absences created frustration, speculation replaced patience, and every return to the pitch carried a silent demand. Not just to play well, but to justify belief. Yet despite all of this, Neymar continued to influence matches when present goals arrived. Assists followed. Defenders adjusted entire systems to stop him. His impact remained undeniable, even when conversations drifted away from football itself. Living under this constant observation requires mental resilience, the kind that is rarely visible, the kind that does not appear in highlight reels. But without it, talent alone cannot survive. And Neymar survived. When Neymar arrived in Paris, the narrative around him shifted immediately. This was no longer a story about growth or adaptation. It became a story about responsibility. About carrying expectation not only for a club, but for an entire project built around his presence. Every touch of the ball was analyzed. Every absence was magnified. And every return to the pitch carried the weight of unresolved ambition. Leadership, in this environment, was not something Neymar could choose. It was something imposed by context. In domestic competitions, his influence was undeniable. Goals in decisive matches, performances in finals, moments where his creativity broke resistance when structure failed. These were not isolated events. They became patterns, repeated confirmations of his importance. But European nights demanded more. They demanded resilience, emotional control, and the ability to perform while carrying doubt. The Champions League became the ultimate stage, a place where Neymar was expected not only to shine, but to justify belief. Reaching the final was a defining moment, not because it completed the story, but because it proved capacity. It demonstrated that when present, Neymar elevated the level of everyone around him. Defenses adjusted, space opened, games changed rhythm, injuries interrupted continuity, criticism followed. But what remained consistent was impact upon return. Immediate influence, immediate gravity, the kind that cannot be trained, only embodied. This version of Neymar was different, less spontaneous, more aware, still creative but forged through pressure, and that transformation mattered. And Neymar survived. When Neymar's career is observed with distance, what becomes clear is that his story was never meant to be simple. It was never designed to fit into a single narrative of success or failure. Neymar existed in the spaces between expectation and expression, between structure and freedom. And that tension defined everything that followed. Statistically, his career already places him among the most productive players of his generation. Hundreds of goals scored across club and international football, goals delivered in finals, goals that directly influenced trophies, league titles in different countries, continental championships, individual awards and global recognition. These facts are not open to interpretation. They are recorded. They are permanent. Yet numbers alone fail to explain Neymar's importance, because his influence extended beyond results. He changed how football felt to watch. At a time when the game increasingly moved toward automation and tactical rigidity, Neymar remained expressive, creative, unpredictable. He reminded the world that joy could still exist at the highest level. For many young players, Neymar represented permission to dribble, permission to improvise, permission to express personality under pressure. This influence cannot be measured statistically, but it can be seen everywhere, in streets, in academies and stadiums across continents. His career was not free from setbacks. Injuries interrupted momentum. Expectations sometimes became burdens. Criticism often became louder than appreciation. But resilience does not always look heroic. Sometimes it simply looks like returning. Again, and again, and again. Neymar did that repeatedly. Football history often simplifies its stories. It celebrates titles. It counts trophies. But the deeper stories belong to those who changed how the game was experienced. And Neymar belongs to that category. At Untold Football, this is why these stories matter. Because football is not only about winning, it is about influence, about identity, about courage under pressure. If this journey added depth to how you see Neymar, leave a like, subscribe to Untold Football, and stay with us. Because legends are not defined only by trophies. They are defined by impact and by the courage to remain authentic.